Welcome back to On the Move with Victor Shi. This is still Victor Shi. It is Wednesday, January 4th, 2023, and it's hard to believe that it's only Wednesday, the first Wednesday of the year, and that we're only 4 days into the new year because there is absolutely no shortage of news and drama, particularly in the House of Representatives. For those who may have missed it, yesterday, Kevin McCarthy lost his bid for speakership not once, not twice, but three times. This is something that hasn't happened since 1842, so it's completely unprecedented. And I guess it's another first for Kevin McCarthy. Maybe not the first that he wants to go down in history for, but it's a first nonetheless. And I think that'll be his legacy going into this next Congress, which hasn't even been sworn in yet because of the lack of votes that Kevin McCarthy has, the lack of votes for any Republican leader so far. So we'll all be tuned into that. And I'm sure all of you have questions about what this means for the House, whether Kevin McCarthy still has any chance of being the next speaker, and if not, who does, and what this all says about the Republican Party writ large and how much disarray it's in. I'll be joined by Representative Torres whenever he comes on later today. Should be any moment. But before we do so, I do want to just quickly maybe get into some of the news of the day and something that caught my eye yesterday. We've been talking about abortion and just young people and just in general, the lack of access to abortion after the Dobbs decision fell, and just these Republican states that have really tried to roll back rights. And yesterday, I think it was good news that FDA basically made this change that would allow pharmacies like Walgreens or CVS to offer abortion pills, basically in that way expanding access to red states and also those states who may ban abortion. And so I think that was an important move, and I think really underscores just how I think important it is to provide access to reproductive health care and also abortion pills. So that was, I think good news, and also especially against the backdrop of so many states trying to roll back these rights. Another thing that I have found pretty interesting, and I don't know if any of you guys have read this story. It was in the Atlantic, and it talks about this new program called ChatGPT. And it's this interesting program. It's an artificial intelligence program, and it basically programs so that it writes papers for you. So you basically input a couple of keywords, and then what it does is that it basically generates an essay for you. And so there was this Atlantic essay that basically talked about this new program called ChatGPT and how now that's kind of marking the death of English and also essay writing. And so I think it's an interesting development. For me, for those who may not know, I'm currently an English major at UCLA. And so I particularly feel strongly about this because I think the importance of writing, and I think it's one of the skills that everyone should have. And this program, I think does a lot of danger to the future of writing, and I think to future generations. And so we'll see where this goes. I know a lot of people think it just helps in terms of the just writing process. Maybe it helps young people who are constantly stressed. But to me, I don't see many benefits to this, I guess, program. I'm curious to see what you all think of it, and hopefully we can drop down this link in the show notes or in the comment section, or if anyone has it available or has read it before, let me know what you think, because I think it's pretty interesting. And here we have Representative Ritchie Torres. I'm assuming you're in DC, Representative Torres.
I am in DC, so we're going to reconvene at 12 p.m.
Yes, I know.
Rounds of voting, the Republicans will have to navigate.
Yes, it's going to be a chaotic day, and I want to talk about all of that with you. And if it weren't for the current fiasco in the House, I do want to remind everyone, Representative Torres would be serving his second term in office, but because of this chaos going on right now, he has still not been sworn in yet. But nonetheless, he's someone who has been a really extraordinary member of Congress, and I know will continue to be so. Thank you so much for joining us today on such short notice.
Absolutely. It's an honor to be here.
Of course. So I want to begin by asking you about what happened yesterday. It was supposed to be a day that was filled with celebration. I think a lot of pomp and circumstance, with many representatives bringing their family to be sworn in. But instead, it turned to be pretty much chaos. Walk us through what your expectations were going into the day, and then walk us through what that day was like to be literally on the House floor as all of that was ensuing.
Well, we expected a day of celebration and jubilation with our family members which is typical of a traditional swearing in. But there's nothing typical about a Republican majority. We witnessed a dramatic display of division and dysfunction among House Republicans. The far right has effectively declared war on its own leadership. Never in 100 years since 1923 has the nominee for the majority party failed to win the vote for speaker in the first round. And McCarthy lost not one, not two, but three rounds of voting.
Yeah.
He received fewer votes than Hakeem Jeffries, who commanded unanimous support from the Democratic caucus, the House Democratic caucus. And at one point, Matt Gaetz nominates Jim Jordan, who had just nominated Kevin McCarthy.
Right.
And Jim Jordan's speech for Kevin McCarthy led to more votes for Jim Jordan. So it all would be laughable were the stakes not so serious. Like there's a sense in which the psychodrama in the Republican Party is both comedic and tragic. It's comedic because Republicans are making a mockery of themselves, but it's tragic because it's corrosive to Congress as an institution. It's corrosive to the United States as a country, and it's brought governing to a grinding halt, which is not an accident. That is the purpose. That is the agenda of the far right.
So I want to ask you more about that later on, but I can't help but think about, I mean, you paint such a good picture of kind of where things fall right now. I mean, yesterday I was quite stunned after seeing Jim Jordan nominate Kevin McCarthy and then Matt Gaetz nominating Jim Jordan. I mean, it's one of those things where you just can't make up, but I couldn't also help but think about how yesterday happened to be Speaker Pelosi's last day serving in Congress. And I couldn't help but notice that stark contrast between her leadership style and Kevin McCarthy's, I think, lack of leadership style. Anyone who's worked in politics, who's in the House, knows that whipping votes is one of the most important but basic things to have in your kind of skill set, your repertoire. But Kevin McCarthy failed at that spectacularly. And I'm wondering what you think happened and kind of why you think it happened. Is it because members don't like Kevin McCarthy or they think he hasn't done enough? Or can you shed light on anything into kind of what motivated these Republicans to vote against McCarthy?
I'm tempted to say, I know Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is a friend of mine, and Kevin McCarthy, you're no Nancy Pelosi. and yesterday we saw a tale of two houses. We saw the unity of House Democrats around Hakeem Jeffries, and we saw the dysfunction and disunity of Republicans over Kevin McCarthy, who is being held hostage by the far right of his own party, which is of his own making. And so the contrast between the two parties has never been more glaring. House Democrats represent the governing wing of the House, whereas House Republicans represent the grandstanding and wing of the House, which wants to grind government to a halt. But to your point about Kevin McCarthy, it was shocking to see, it's not often that rank and file members of Congress declare war on their leadership. At one point, Matt Gaetz went on the House floor and accused Kevin McCarthy of selling shares of himself. Yeah. And at one point, Matt Gaetz said that he's willing to obstruct Kevin McCarthy, even if it means electing Hakeem Jeffries as the speaker, which is an outcome that I would love, but it underscores the deeply personal nature of the hatred and animosity that these 20 members feel toward Kevin McCarthy. And it's not clear how you overcome such a deeply felt hatred. And then as recently as last night, Matt Gaetz went out of his way to send a letter to the architect of the Capitol claiming that Kevin McCarthy is illegally occupying the Speaker's office and demanding that he be evicted. And in the letter, he asked a provocative question: how long can Kevin McCarthy remain in the Speaker's office before he's considered a squatter? I'm from the Bronx. Those are fighting words.
Yeah.
It is shocking to see rank and file members declare war on their leadership and to express hatred, not in the back room, but on the House floor in a dramatic fashion.
It's so shocking. And I think for this new class of representatives, I mean, I know there's Maxwell Frost, who's the first Gen Z member of Congress. It's his first time. other.
Look, we have Maxwell Frost, they have George Santos.
Exactly. And I was going to ask you about that because you have this new class that the Republican Party is in so much disarray. You have Matt Gaetz on one end, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Kevin McCarthy. I mean, just so many extreme Republicans. And on the Democratic side, you have amazing candidates. And, I'm wondering, how has the Democratic Party so far coalesced and worked despite what's happening on the Republican side? I mean, I know that right now there's difficulty just getting sworn in. You guys haven't been sworn in. There's difficulty with committee assignments and introducing bills. But how have you all responded or tried to come together despite everything that's happening on the other side of the aisle?
Look, we refuse to allow ourselves to be distracted. We're going to keep our focus on the end game, which is delivering for the American people. The fundamental difference between Democrats and Republicans is that we're serious about governing.
Yeah.
And the difference became too glaring to ignore yesterday. We have the most diverse legislative caucus in the history of the United States. More than 70% of our members are women, members of the LGBTQ community, people of color. We have the first Gen Z member of Congress. We have the first person of color to lead any legislative caucus of any legislative body at the federal level. So we are making history. We're blazing trails. At one point, Elise Stefanik described the Republican conference as the most diverse in history. Yeah. And I thought to myself, is she referring to George Santos? by what standard is the Republican conference the most diverse in history? It was laughable on his face.
Oh my God.
I guess you can make an argument that the Republican conference is gay and Afro-Latino and biracial and Ukrainian and Belgian and Brazilian and Jewish and Catholic like George Santos. But I feel like most Americans are going to be unpersuaded.
It's the quote Jew-ish. I mean, it's all. I mean, it's so sad what's happening on that side. But I want to go back to.
I mean, who needs the onion when you have House Republicans?
Right, exactly. So yesterday we saw something quite spectacular, which is, I mean, by the end of the third round, Kevin McCarthy ended up losing support with 20 members voting against him, and Jim Jordan for Jim Jordan compared to, I think it was 19 for the first two rounds. How concerning should Kevin be now? And do you have any insight on how things will go today for the second day of voting?
It seems to me that Kevin McCarthy has no strategy for breaking the stalemate beyond forcing more votes. But there's no reason to think that forcing more votes is going to change the outcome of those votes. So he's in a state of denial about the depth of the rebellion, the insurgency against him in his own party. But keep in mind, no one should feel sorry for Kevin McCarthy. Yeah. Kevin McCarthy is no moderate. Since the election of Donald Trump, and especially since January 6th, he has been an enabler of the insurrectionist far right. And now he's being devoured by the same ideological forces that he aided and abetted, that he enabled for years. So no one should feel sorry for him. He planted the seeds of his own downfall.
So who knows how long this process will take? I hope it doesn't take too long, but walk us through what you think happens if Kevin McCarthy still doesn't get enough votes today. I know you said there might be some sort of power sharing agreement, or maybe there might be speculation that maybe Republicans vote for Democrats or Democrats vote for Republicans. I'm not sure, but where do you think Republicans go after today if they don't have a speaker?
Well, I can assure you that no Democrats are voting for Republicans.
Okay, good.
We're unanimously voting for Hakeem Jeffries as speaker. If there are Republicans who want to cross the aisle and vote for Hakeem Jeffries, we welcome their support. So that's the only manifestation of bipartisanship that you will ever conceivably see. But there's no circumstance in which we're going to abandon one of the greatest public servants of his time, Hakeem Jeffries, in favor of a Republican. That's anyone who believes that, I have a bridge to sell you. Here's the problem. The operation of Congress revolves around the selection of a speaker. Without a speaker, we cannot swear in members, we cannot adopt rules, we cannot form committees, we cannot pass legislation. Yeah. Without a speaker, nothing happens. So the dysfunction of the Republican Party is bringing Congress, the House in particular, to a grinding halt. And therein lies the problem. And if McCarthy is unacceptable, it could be that Republicans will consider his number two, Stephen Scalise. But what if all of the Republican leadership is unacceptable?
Right.
Then you could be in a state of indefinite standstill.
Yeah.
And I would not consider it outside the realm of possibility. These are not the Republicans who are holding McCarthy hostage are not rational actors who can be swayed by perks like earmarks and committee assignments. I perceive them as hostage takers, as arsonists who are willing to burn everything down, including the leadership of their own party. And how do you negotiate with arsonists? How do you placate the implacable?
Right. Right. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm wondering, I mean, this is all happening in Congress. And I think those who follow politics are getting a good laugh out of this. It's very entertaining. But also, like you said, it's sad that it's happening right now. And this is the state of the Republican Party. But I'm wondering how you think voters are seeing this. I mean, to me, it seems like voters are going to see what's happening in the Republican Party and just see a Republican Party in total dysfunction and chaos. But do you think that's how voters are seeing this too, and what's happening currently in the House?
I hope it. I hope the yesterday crystallizes the contrast between the two parties.
Yeah.
Yes, I fear that it might reinforce cynicism about politics in general, but I hope it exposes for the world to see the extremism of the Republican Party. Right. The central lesson learned from the midterm elections, which reduced the red wave to a red trickle, is that the American people are allergic to extremism. Right. Those Republicans who are running on overturning Roe versus Wade or running on denying the election, those were the Republicans who fared the most poorly in competitive districts in the 2022 midterms. So this simply reinforces the extremism that cost Republicans the midterms in the first place, that has put McCarthy in a real bind. We're not for the extremism of the Republican Party. We're not for January 6th and the reversal of Roe versus Wade, these two earth-shattering events. You might have had the makings of a traditional red wave election.
Yeah. Wait, which is a very scary thought to think about. And thank goodness we don't have a traditional red wave, because Kevin McCarthy might be speaker now. But let's say a couple of weeks from now, there is a leader of the Republican Party, there's a speaker of the House. What is that going to look like? Because yesterday I was watching the speeches. I'm sure you paid close attention to them too. I mean, when Jim Jordan was talking, he said he would, do oversight investigations, that there would be investigations into Hunter Biden, into the Biden administration, hold Democrats accountable. Is there any sense that you can feel from the Republican Party that they're serious about, legislating and creating good policy? Or is it what, Jim Jordan said about holding Democrats accountable? And if that happens, how do Democrats plan to respond to that?
Well, notice that in his ostensible nominating speech for Kevin McCarthy, Jim Jordan decried what he describes as the weaponization of the federal government.
Yeah.
But you're going to see Republicans commit the very evil that they claim to oppose. They're going to weaponize federal government against their adversaries, against their enemies. You're going to see vindictive impeachment proceedings, like against Secretary Mayorkas. You're going to see frivolous investigations into Hunter Biden. You're going to see attempts to defund not only agencies and offices, but the salaries of individuals in the federal government. It's going to be one of the most performative, vindictive, mean-spirited governments that we've seen in recent memory.
So I guess
we're going to be on defense. Our role is to be the resistance, is to protect the public from the extremes and excesses of a House Republican majority.
And tell us a little bit about your positions. I know you recently launched, or I guess introduced, the Stop Santos Act, which is, I think, a long overdue bill. And it's sad that we had to do that because George Santos basically fabricated and lied about his entire resume. But walk us through that bill, and then also some of the committee assignments that, or maybe not committee assignments, but what you know about what your role is going to be in this new Congress.
It is outrageous that a fundamentally fraudulent candidate like George Santos can flagrantly lie to voters about his qualifications with impunity, without facing legal repercussions at all. And so that inspired me to introduce the Santos Act. Santos stands for Stop Another Non-Truthful Office Seeker. The Santos Act would require federal candidates to disclose in writing, under oath, under the penalty of perjury, their employment, educational, and military history, so that candidates who do lie to voters about their qualifications can finally be punished. Disclosure would enable voters like us to compare what a candidate has said under oath versus what a candidate claims on the campaign trail. It would enable the detection of lies and the exposing and punishing of candidates like George Santos who tell those lies.
It's I think it's so hard to believe that that's what happened in that election, and that Republicans are so comfortable with lying. And so it's such an important bill. And I think on behalf of the entire nation, thank you for introducing that bill, because I'm surprised we didn't have a bill like that in law yet. So I
Can
think
I make a point on that, actually? Because
Yeah,
I think what
absolutely.
it should be understood that George Santos is not an isolated case.
Yeah.
He's an indictment of what the Republican Party has become.
Right.
When you have a political party organized around the big lie, when you have a political party that has become a cult of personality around a fraud like Donald Trump, charlatans like George Santos will inevitably follow. Fraudulence breeds fraudulence.
Yeah.
And so the scandal of George Santos should be seen in the context of the Trumpification of the Republican Party.
And even just the other day, I mean, we saw Trump's taxes get released, and we saw that he had some foreign connections with China. And I just remember that one moment on the debate stage with Joe Biden in 2020, where he said he closed all of his foreign bank accounts in China before he ran for president in 2016. So there just is this pattern of lying and misguiding the American people to hold on to power that I think, I want to ask you before I let you go. I mean, in this new Congress, are there any Republicans who you think still have principle and dignity anymore? You have Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and some other responsible, I think, principled Republicans who maybe we don't see eye to eye on, who you could still have policy discussions with. But are there any left or remaining that you can still have those conversations with, who don't lie and don't spread false claims about elections and truth?
Look, there are certainly Republicans with whom you could have a working relationship, but it's more true in the Senate than in the House. Notice all the bipartisan compromises that we negotiated, whether it's the gun safety compromise or the veteran healthcare compromise or the infrastructure compromise, all of it was done in partnership with Senate Republicans over the objections of House Republicans. Like, House Republicans represent the most reactionary, right-wing breed of Republicans in the country. It's just almost as if they're a different political party. And so the challenge that we face in the House is much greater than the challenge in the Senate, even elsewhere in state and local politics. The House Republicans represent the Freudian Trumpian id of the Republican Party.
Well, that's terrifying, but I'm grateful that there are a great slate of Democratic candidates, including yourself, in office. Before we go, where can our audience find you? Because I think you're doing truly tremendous work. Where can our audience find you on social media?
I'm on Twitter, Instagram. You can Google me. I'm a public figure, and everything you read about me is true. I am actually gay and Afro-Latino and biracial. And so I welcome you to follow me on Twitter.
Wonderful. Representative Torres, thank you so much for joining us today, and best of luck today for round 2 of the votes. And hopefully we can get some votes today.
Absolutely. Take care.
You too. Thanks so much. Well, that was an interesting episode with Representative Torres, who I think helped us make sense of this Republican Party in the House. Like you said, it seems to be a different breed in the House. I mean, you have this Republican Party so hell-bent on maintaining power, and there seems to be no strategy going into today. So we'll all see what happens. I know my eyes will be on the TV today, and you can follow me on Twitter for updates. We'll see what happens. I just hope that we come out of today with some sort of resolution. I know for people like us, for Democrats, we are getting a good laugh out of it. But like Representative Torres said, I mean, the stakes couldn't be higher. It would be laughable if the stakes weren't as high. You have this lack of committee assignments. You don't have people who can introduce bills, who can pass bills. And so I think the longer this drags out, the expense of the improvement of the American people falls on the shoulders of Republicans basically getting their act together. And so we'll all be watching what happens. Like Representative Torres said, the votes start again at noon Eastern time, which for me is in about a little over 30 minutes. So tune into that if you can. If not, I'll be back tomorrow with some updates where I'll be answering your questions. So be sure to ask us your questions either in the comment section, or you can tweet them to at VictorShe2020. And I will try to respond to them tomorrow. In the meantime, just a quick programming note, on Friday, we will be back with David Rothkopf, and again tomorrow for an Ask Me Anything series at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time. You don't want to miss those. Be sure to tune back in. We'll be back tomorrow and the day after, and hopefully every day after that, for new episodes of On the Move. Be sure to like and subscribe, and follow us right here on youtube.com/Politicon so you don't miss a single episode of On the Move. Thanks so much for watching, and stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you tomorrow.